So today we're talking about probability, right? And I don't think people understand this concept about trading. So bear with me while we talk about this. Right now, I am going to go onto the chart, but before I go there, I want to just talk to you face to face. I hope that you're listening to me because I think this is one of the biggest things that changed the way that I trade. If you've been following me for any time, you know that when I do call out something, the likelihood of it working is very, very high, right? Not saying that I win every single trade, but I am saying that the likelihood of it winning is very high. But I want you to think about why. It's not because my understanding of the market is better than yours. I am no better than you. I'm no better than anyone. I'm just an average guy on the other side of the world. What I am using is probability. What do we mean by that? So, probability from the perspective of what is the probability of where I buy, it's going to buy. What is the probability of where I sell, it's going to sell, right? I think a lot of people ignore this idea. They ignore this concept, and they keep going and looking for specific patterns, specific strategies, and all that. And these things do not facilitate probability. They facilitate following a set of rules. The question is, do these rules take probability into account? For instance, if I were to pull this card, what is the probability that this card is going to be a red card? Obviously 50-50, because we know that there are 26 red cards in a deck, 26 black cards in a deck. So it's 50-50 that this could be a red card. And in fact, it's a black card. Now that we know a black card has passed, what is the probability that this card is also a red card? Now the probability is changed because now it's now 26 red cards and 25 black cards. So we know that the probability of a red card increases. Unfortunately, it's still a black card. What about now? It increases even more. The probability of a red card being pulled is increased even more, right? Because now it's still 26 to 24, and thus there you get your red card. And that's kind of what I'm doing when I am placing a trade. I'm actually thinking very, very deeply about the probability of if I were to buy here, what is the likelihood that the market is going to continue to buy? So let me show you what I mean, right? Let's go into the chart, right? So for instance, US 30, right, is a bearish market generally, right? Right now, it's a bullish market overall, but right now it seems to be more bearish than it is bullish, right? So what is the probability of if I were to say sell right here that it would sell? I don't know, right? So we need to examine, right? Now, looking at that big bullish candle, do you think that based on, because we just had a news event, right? I believe it was US news. I don't even know what news it was. I don't care, right? Do you think that looking at this big bull candle, even though prices hit this, maybe you want to call it a support, maybe you want to call it, a resistance, a demand zone, Harry, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter, all right? Do we think that it makes sense to sell here given this information? Do we think that the probability that it will sell is higher than it would buy? And if you cannot answer that question with an absolute yes, I think it would sell, selling here will be ill advised. All right. And then when you look at it a little further, you realize it's actually accumulating here, which suggests that it probably might try to do something along these lines where it accumulates, drops, and then goes further. Because even though it's bearish right now, this bull move does not facilitate sells, in my opinion. It can't. It cannot facilitate sells, right? Now, what is really important in the way that I incorporate this into my trading? What I would do is I would look for the area in which I believe it is going to buy, because it's more bullish than it is bearish right now. Generally, it's bearish. Currently, it's bullish. Overall, it's bullish. So you realize we have three things that we just called. So we have the overall direction, the general direction, and the current direction, right? Overall would be what it's doing long term. General would be what it's doing right, like within the last few weeks, generally what it's doing. And then currently is what it's doing right now. What is the probability that US 30 is going to do something along these lines? it's a little high in my opinion, because I do not think that it makes sense for US 30 to sell from here. So I think that it has to go up. But in order for it to go up, it has to get rid of any buyers who bought along or in within this area. So in fact, let me change this drawing. I would not be surprised if it actually produces a move like this, where it consolidates, it dips down to take out this, right? And then go up. That is what I think is a probable scenario. And that is supported by what I'm seeing here, where it's stumbling. Now, the stumbling is not necessarily a bad thing, it just means that it's trying to accumulate orders. So, people buying, people selling, but it's not going anywhere. So, I want us to understand very, very, very deeply what the probability of any given scenario is. And when you stop and you think about the way that the market functions, and you try to incorporate probability rather than just using a blind strategy, because that's technically what it is. If a strategy does not take into account the probability of a scenario playing out, what you're actually doing is literally shooting yourself in the foot and trying to run a marathon, because you're not taking into account the important detail of the probability, right? Context, right? So I really hope that you understood this one. I hope that it made some sense to you. The biggest thing for me is I always try to take into account what the market is likely to do. So pay attention to the probability, guys. See you soon. Pay very, very close attention to the probability.